She boarded the flight quietly. No entourage, no designer labels screaming for attention. Just a calm, elegant black woman in seat 1A, clutching a book and sipping tea. But within minutes, that silence was shattered by a slap, a flight attendant's hand, a public humiliation, and one devastating mistake. Because the woman they thought was just another passenger was actually Arielle Monroe, a tech billionaire and secret owner of the airline. So, how did it come to this? Why did no one recognize her? What silent battles had she been fighting long before that slap, and what would happen when the world found out who she truly was? This isn't just a story about wealth. It's about power mistaken for passivity. It's about racism at 30,000 feet. It's about what happens when dignity is dismissed and how a woman reclaims not just her seat, but the entire sky. Buckle up for a 12-part journey of justice, reckoning, and grace that will leave you breathless. If this story moves you, like, share, and subscribe to our channel, because this isn't just one woman's fight, it's all of ours. Let's begin. The hum of the jet bridge echoed like a low heartbeat as passengers trickled onto Clearview Airlines Flight 227 bound for Seattle. First class gleamed under cool LED lighting, pristine white leather seats. Overhead, bins that closed like whispers, and the faint scent of citrus and leather conditioner dancing in the air. Arielle Monroe stepped onto the plane quietly, dressed in a soft gray turtleneck, black slacks, and polished low-heeled flats. Her natural curls were pinned into a neat bun at the nape of her neck. No designer purse, no diamond studs. Nothing screamed wealth, though she could have bought the entire plane 10 times over and still had room for coffee. She walked with the kind of grace that didn't ask permission, didn't need validation, but still. Her eyes moved cautiously, scanning the faces of the crew. She wasn't here to be seen. She was here to see. The attendant at the front cabin, a woman with strawberry blonde hair pulled tight in a ponytail, glanced up from her iPad. Her name tag read Tamara. "Ma'am," Tamara said flatly, "economy is that way." She gestured with a clipboard toward the back of the aircraft. Arielle met her eyes calmly. "I'm in 1A. Tamara's expression didn't change. "That's not possible," she replied. "This row is reserved for elite-tier passengers or company guests." "I understand," Arielle said gently. She reached into her jacket and retrieved a boarding pass, printed with the Clearview Airlines logo and clearly marked Seat 1A. Tamara looked at it briefly, but her lips tightened. "I don't know how you got this," Tamara said, her voice lowering just enough to sting. "But I'm going to ask you to move." Arielle tilted her head slightly. "I'm not moving. Kindly check the manifest." Tamara snatched the boarding pass and stormed toward the cockpit. A few passengers in first class glanced up, sensing tension but looking away quickly, as people often do when injustice is small enough to ignore. Arielle placed her small carry-on in the overhead bin. She sat down slowly, smoothing the crease of her pants with her hands. Her heart beat steadily, but her breath came with intention, counting to 4 on the inhale, 6 on the exhale. A technique her grandmother once taught her during nights when the lights were off and the gas had run out. Minutes passed. Then Tamara returned, this time with another crew member, a tall man in his 50s with pilot wings pinned to his chest. "I'm Captain Stokes," he said. "We seem to have a seating issue. Would you mind relocating to another section while we sort this out?" Arielle did not rise. "I'm fine, right here," she said softly. Tamara folded her arms. You're not entitled to this seat. That word, entitled. Arielle's jaw tensed slightly, but she stayed seated. What name did you use to book this? Captain Stokes asked. Arielle Monroe. He blinked. That name meant nothing to him. As intended. Tamara's voice dropped into a whisper. This is getting disruptive. You need to go back now, or what Arielle asked. Calm as still water. You'll remove me for sitting in the seat I paid for. Tamara took a step closer and slapped her. The sound was sharp like a towel cracking in a locker room. It stunned the cabin into silence. Even the hum of engines seemed to hush. Arielle didn't move, didn't flinch. She slowly reached up, touched her cheek, then turned her face back to Tamara. You just made a mistake, she said, one that will follow you for the rest of your life. The words weren't angry. They weren't loud, but they carried a quiet gravity that made Captain Stokes take a step back. A young man across the aisle fumbled with his phone, pretending not to record, but very much recording. Arielle returned her gaze to the window, exhaling. No one came to her defense. No one handed her a napkin, not even a whisper of concern. And yet, she didn't crumble. Because Arielle Monroe was not just a passenger, she was the new owner of Clearview Airlines. She had finalized the acquisition of its entire global operation just 72 hours earlier. The ink was still drying. But she had come aboard under her legal name, no CEO title, no entourage, no press release, because she wanted to experience what everyday passengers, especially black women, endured in silence. She didn't expect to be struck, but the data she needed was now painfully, perfectly clear. She glanced across the aisle at the young man holding his phone. He looked unsure, torn between fear and principle. She nodded at him gently, and then she looked down at her phone and typed 4 simple words to her assistant on the ground. Land this plane early. The world would change before touchdown, and so would Tamara's. The cabin had returned to motion, but not balance. Passengers who had witnessed the slap were now stealing glances toward Arielle, whispering in low tones to their seatmates. A couple in row 2 were visibly uncomfortable, shifting in their seats as if guilt were contagious. Most, however, buried themselves deeper into their devices and in-flight magazines, hoping the moment would dissolve like a bad dream. Arielle sat still in seat 1A, her cheek faintly red from Tamara's hand. She stared ahead, her thoughts running in quiet spirals. Not rage, not vengeance, but grief. Not for herself, but for every woman who'd ever swallowed indignity because there were no cameras, no titles, no witnesses willing to speak. She had worn power lightly, on purpose. She could have flown on her own Gulfstream. She could have come with a security detail and a press team, but that wouldn't show her the rot inside the system. That wouldn't show her what it felt like to be unseen in plain sight. Now she knew. Her phone vibrated gently in her lap. A message from Lana Carrington, her chief of staff, received, "Redirect in jet to Seattle. My team will meet you on tarmac." "You okay?" Arielle typed back, "I'm fine. Proceed." She didn't mean fine in the way people usually did. She meant ready, certain, composed. Tamara walked by with a tray of beverages, deliberately skipping over Arielle's row. She smiled warmly at a white man in 1C, then moved on. Across the aisle, the young man who had filmed the incident gave Arielle a cautious look. His phone was face down now, but his conscience seemed restless. He opened his mouth slightly, then closed it. Arielle met his eyes briefly and nodded once. It was enough. He understood. A few rows behind, a flight attendant named Amber Ellis sat on the jump seat, silent. She had seen the slap, too. She had heard Tamara's tone, but protocol kept her frozen. That, and the quiet fear that if she spoke up, she'd lose her job. She'd worked for Clearview Airlines for 8 years. And now, for the first time, she questioned what those years had cost. Tamara approached the cockpit again and spoke in hushed tones with Captain Stokes. They cast occasional glances toward Arielle as if she were a problem to be managed, not a person with a right to her seat or her dignity. But Arielle didn't look their way. She leaned her head back against the seat and closed her eyes. She let her mind drift to her grandmother's kitchen in Baton Rouge. The smell of collard greens and sweet cornbread, her grandmother's voice, steady and soft, telling her when to speak and when to wait. "Don't let the storm in the room become the storm in you," she'd say. "Keep your weather calm." Arielle had kept it calm, but that didn't mean she'd let it go. The intercom buzzed overhead. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Stokes began, "due to an unexpected technical advisory, we will be diverting this flight to Seattle-Tacoma International Airport for safety evaluation. We apologize for the inconvenience and appreciate your understanding." A small murmur rolled through the cabin. People glanced at their watches. A businessman in row 4 groaned audibly. Tamara returned to the aisle with a brittle smile. "We'll be landing shortly. Please make sure your tray tables are stowed and seat backs upright." As she passed Arielle, she avoided eye contact again. But this time, there was a faint twitch in her jaw, the first crack in her practiced control. Arielle watched her, wondering how many slaps that woman had delivered in silence, ones that didn't leave a mark but bruised the soul just the same. 20 minutes later, the plane began its descent. Arielle watched the clouds shift, fade, and give way to the emerald trees of the Pacific Northwest. She felt no turbulence, just clarity. When the wheels touched down, the aircraft taxied toward a private hangar Arielle had acquired years ago under a shell company, one of many she used when investing quietly in public-facing industries. A black SUV was already waiting at the tarmac. Beside it stood Lana Carrington, clipboard in hand, flanked by 2 executives from PulseCor's legal division. Captain Stokes blinked when he saw them through the cockpit window. He turned to Tamara. "Did you know about this?" Tamara's expression shifted. "No. What the hell is going on?" A voice came over the internal phone from the gate liaison. There's a legal team here asking to board before deplaning. They say they're with the owner." Captain Stokes furrowed his brow. Owner. But Arielle was already rising. She retrieved her bag, checked her seat one last time for anything left behind, and stepped into the aisle. Every eye followed her now, not because of her race, not because of her wealth, but because something about her composure was unsettling in a way that only truth could be. She walked to the front calmly and stopped in front of Tamara. Tamara stiffened. "You need to return to your seat until the crew I'm done sitting," Arielle said. And then, for the first time, she reached into her bag not for her boarding pass, not for ID, but for a letter with the official seal of Clearview Airlines. She unfolded it slowly and handed it to Tamara. It was a signed memorandum of acquisition, dated 3 days ago. At the bottom, in clear ink, the signature of Arielle Monroe, new majority shareholder and executive chair of Clearview's parent company. Tamara's face drained of color. Captain Stokes leaned over to read it and stepped back with a faint, audible gulp. Behind them, Amber Ellis stood frozen. Arielle turned toward the intercom. Without asking, she pressed the PA button. The speaker crackled. "Good evening. My name is Arielle Monroe. I am the new owner of Clearview Airlines." Gasps spread like wind across wheat. "I came aboard today to experience what your passengers experience. I was not met with courtesy. I was not given respect. I was struck in front of witnesses and dismissed without investigation." She paused. "My goal is not revenge. It is reform, and that starts now." She stepped off the plane. Behind her, silence thicker than air remained. Tamara's hands trembled. Amber Ellis sat down, and Jaden Wells, the young man with the phone, finally whispered to himself, "She's not just the owner, she's the storm." The silence on Flight 227 hung like heavy humidity, thick and suffocating. No one moved. Tamara Voss stood near the galley, still gripping the paper that had undone her entire sense of order. The name, Arielle Monroe, now echoed in her head with the weight of finality. Captain Stokes had excused himself to the cockpit. His earlier confidence had curdled into confusion. Everything about this flight had flipped upside down. Meanwhile, Arielle stepped calmly onto the metal stairs that led down to the tarmac. The wind caught her curls ever so slightly, and the deep blue of the Seattle sky framed her like a portrait. Lana Carrington, her chief of staff, walked up with brisk confidence, holding a tablet and a file folder. She had on a slim black pantsuit, her afro pulled into a high puff, and gold-rimmed glasses perched low on her nose. "Statement ready, Ms. Monroe," she said. Arielle took the tablet. Lana hesitated. "Are you sure you want to go this public? This fast? I'm not going public," Arielle replied quietly. "Not yet." She looked back up the stairs. "But the crew is—" Lana nodded once. She understood. This wasn't about spectacle. This was about systems. Arielle handed back the tablet and walked over to the small group of legal aides standing by the black SUV. She gave brief instructions. 2 remained with Lana. The others ascended the aircraft stairs inside the cabin. The silence fractured when the legal team appeared. One held a folder marked disciplinary documentation, executive orders, and the other carried a small recording device. Passengers whispered louder now. A few leaned into the aisle, not bothering to hide their curiosity. "Miss Voss," the taller attorney said with professional composure, "you are required to disembark immediately. You're being placed on temporary administrative leave, pending internal review and a formal misconduct hearing." Tamara's mouth opened, but no words came out. "This is absurd." She finally spat, her voice cracking. I didn't know who she was. Amber Ellis stood from her jump seat, trembling. She wanted to say something, anything, but she froze again. Jaden Wells, still in 3C, slowly unlocked his phone and opened the video. He hesitated. Did he post it? Was it his story to tell, or was silence complicity? Arielle re-entered the aircraft slowly. The energy in the cabin shifted again. This time, people leaned back in their seats as if giving her space might spare them scrutiny. She walked directly to Amber and stood in front of her. "What's your name?" Amber's voice was barely a whisper. "Amber Ellis. Ma'am, you saw what happened?" Amber nodded. "Yes, I did." "Did you say anything?" Amber's eyes filled. "No, ma'am, I didn't." Arielle paused. "Why not?" "Because I'm afraid," she said truthfully. "Because this job feeds my kids. Because Tamara is a senior flight lead. because no one ever listens to people like me when we do speak." Arielle didn't scold her. She didn't praise her either. She simply said, "You don't have to be silent anymore." Amber nodded slowly. Arielle turned to the cabin. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried a quiet thunder. "For those of you wondering what happens next," she said, "this isn't about revenge. This is about accountability. And accountability, in this company, will no longer be optional." She glanced at Jaden. "Would you mind stepping outside with me?" Jaden hesitated. Then he stood. The video still sat open on his screen. He followed her to the stairs. Once they reached the bottom, away from listening ears, Arielle turned to him. "What's your name?" "Jaden Wells." "I'm just a student, ma'am. I'm in a business ethics program at Clark University." "You recorded what happened?" "Yes, but I didn't post it." "Why not?" "Because I thought maybe it wasn't my place." "That maybe you'd rather keep it private." Arielle considered that for a moment. Then she smiled gently. "That was respectful. Thank you. Would you like to be part of something bigger than ethics class?" Jaden blinked. "Yes. Anything? Then give the video to Lana. She'll walk you through what comes next. You'll be protected and credited, but more importantly, you'll be heard." He handed over his phone without question. Arielle turned and walked toward the hangar. Cameras were already being set up, not News Crew's Pulse Corps' private communications team. This wouldn't be a press stunt. It would be a declaration. As Arielle prepared to speak, Lana adjusted the mic stand and tapped her earpiece. "We're live to internal staff only," she said. "Secure stream, all executives tuned in, media embargo in place." Arielle stepped forward. She looked into the lens not with rage, not with grief, but with that same calm that had carried her through the slap, the dismissal, and the silence. "My name is Arielle Monroe," she began. "I am the new owner of Clearview Airlines. I am also a black woman." She let that sit for a moment. "Yesterday, I walked into a boardroom of men who smiled at my money but dismissed my mind. Today, I boarded my own plane to observe the culture I had just inherited." Her voice didn't waver. "I was told I did not belong. I was asked to move. I was called entitled. And then I was slapped. Not just by a hand, but by a system that has normalized disrespect, especially toward women of color." Jaden stood nearby, watching in awe. Amber Ellis had come down too, standing just behind the crew van, clutching her lanyard like a lifeline. Arielle continued, "This airline is about to change. Not because I was mistreated, but because it should have never taken that to spark change in the first place." Her eyes stayed locked on the camera. "I don't want apologies. I want transformation. I want silent bystanders to find their voices. I want protocol that protects dignity, not power." She took a breath. "And I want Tamara Voss off every plane until this matter's investigated properly." The last sentence landed like a gavel. Behind the camera, Lana nodded. The legal team already had everything in motion. When Arielle stepped away, a quiet round of applause began, from Jaden, from Amber, from one of the security guards who had watched silently until now. It was not a victory celebration. It was something deeper. The first ripple in a system long overdue for change. Captain Howard Stokes sat stiffly in the cockpit, helmeted in silence and stale air. His fingers drummed the throttle lever as though trying to restart a conversation with himself. The word ownership echoed in his head like a ricochet. He had flown hundreds of flights, logged thousands of hours. but he had never miscalculated this badly. Earlier that morning, when Tamara had flagged the disruptive woman in seat 1A, he had backed her without question. That was his first mistake. His second was assuming the woman's skin tone made her a passenger he could ignore. Now, that woman, Arielle Monroe, was not only the airline's new majority owner, but she was orchestrating a corporate reckoning from the tarmac just beyond his cockpit glass. A soft knock broke the silence. It was Lana Carrington, dignified, efficient, and not here for his excuses. "Captain Stokes," she said, "you're being asked to remain grounded while the ethics committee reviews your decision to escalate passenger movement without protocol." "I didn't." He started, then stopped himself. "I followed senior crew recommendations." Lana raised one brow. "And that's precisely the problem," she replied. "You followed the person who created the problem. Without verifying, without asking questions, you saw her as a disruption, not a human being." Stokes shifted in his seat. She didn't announce herself as the CEO. She shouldn't have had to. Lana handed him a folder. "Your attorney will be provided, should you request one. Until then, please stay seated, outside." The tarmac buzzed with controlled chaos. Clearview Airlines' legal and operations teams had begun coordinating immediate internal reviews. Arielle's private security remained stationed at all exits, not for threat management, but to ensure transparency. Inside the cabin, the tension remained fragile. Some passengers had requested to deplane. Others were filming, whispering, or scrolling through social media to see if the story had broken. It had. Within 35 minutes of Arielle's live stream to internal employees, a junior staffer, likely someone too shocked to follow embargo, had leaked the clip. It appeared first on a closed Discord server, then Twitter, then CNN's breaking banner. The words were simple. "Sharp black woman slapped in first class, turns out. She owns the plane." Arielle had returned to the gate briefly to meet with her legal advisors. She didn't speak to the press. She didn't issue a second statement. She let the truth sit unpolished and raw. But inside the plane, Amber Ellis began to feel a weight lift slowly, uncertainly from her chest. She had stayed. She could have left when the plane was cleared. No one would have blamed her. But something in Arielle's eyes earlier had stirred a part of her she thought she buried long ago. Amber moved through the aisle, picking up plastic cups and adjusting oxygen mask clasps out of habit. It was second nature. But what wasn't habit was this feeling of being noticed, of being allowed to be more than quiet compliance. Jaden Wells noticed too. He approached her carefully, holding a water bottle. "You okay?" Amber nodded. "I don't know what I am, but I know I'm tired of being scared." Jaden nodded. "Me too." They shared a brief silence. Then Amber spoke again. "You know what the worst part was? When she got slapped. Everyone looked at her, but no one stood up. Not even me." Jaden's gaze dropped. "I filmed it. I didn't stand up either." Amber looked at him, then smiled faintly. "Maybe now we do." In another part of the airport, Clearview's PR director, a man named Glenn Darby, was sweating through his collar. He had never seen an escalation spiral this quickly. "We need a response," he said into the conference speakerphone. "You don't need a response," Lana replied over the line from the tarmac. "You need reflection. This is already on national media. Then you should have handled it before the nation got involved." Darby cleared his throat. "Should we suspend the crew, issue a generic apology?" "We can say she is not just a CEO," Lana interrupted. She is the new executive owner of Clearview Airlines, and you will not reduce her role to passive victimhood in your spin strategy. Arielle, sitting next to Lana, didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her silence said more than any statement the PR team could craft. Her silence said, "I've seen this play out. Not again. Not this time." Back on the aircraft, Tamara Voss was escorted off the plane with quiet insistence. No cuffs, no drama, just a suitcase she didn't pack and a future she didn't expect. As she passed the seated passengers, some looked away, others watched. No one clapped. This wasn't a show. This was consequence. Outside, as she descended the stairs, she paused and turned to see Arielle watching her from across the lot. There was no hatred in Arielle's face, only gravity. Tamara wanted to speak, but she didn't. She just nodded. Whether it was acknowledgement or regret, even she didn't know. The next hour brought a cascade of executive firings, led internally. Arielle refused to make it theatrical. She knew how to wield silence as both blade and balm. Meanwhile, Arielle requested a private meeting with Amber and Jaden inside a quiet terminal lounge. Water bottles were provided, snacks too, but no cameras. "I wanted to thank you both," she said softly. Amber fidgeted. "I didn't do much. You stayed. You spoke when it mattered. That's more than most." Jaden looked confused. "Why us? Because change doesn't come from people in towers. It comes from people in aisles." Amber's eyes welled. Jaden finally asked, "What happens to the airline?" Arielle paused, then answered with resolve. "It gets a new name, a new culture, a new accountability framework." "What name?" Amber whispered. Arielle smiled. "Solora Air," she said, "from Sol, meaning sun, and Aura, meaning edge. We fly toward light, not away from it." Jaden exhaled like someone who had been holding his breath his entire life. Amber nodded slowly. "That's beautiful." Arielle stood. "It's not just a name, it's a promise." As she walked out of the lounge, the weight of her mother's old lessons echoed in her chest. Dignity isn't something you wait to be given. Baby girl, it's something you carry. The sun was beginning to set over Seattle. The old plane sat idle on the runway, but something far greater had taken flight, and Arielle Monroe was just getting started. The boardroom smelled of lemon oil and fresh regret. Arielle Monroe stood at the head of the long walnut conference table, hands folded. Behind her, the skyline of downtown Seattle loomed like a silent audience. Floor-to-ceiling windows spilled daylight across the conference table, catching the cautious faces of the Clearview Airlines executive team, what was left of it. Half the chairs were empty. The others were filled with people who knew their futures hung by a thread. Arielle didn't speak for the first 10 seconds. She let silence do the work of shame. Then she began. "You all know who I am now. That should never have mattered." Her voice was calm, composed, but the weight of her words pressed on every wall. "I boarded Flight 627 to Houston like any other human being. I was tired. I was grieving. I wasn't there to test anyone. I wasn't even thinking about corporate matters. My mother had died. That flight was meant to take me home for her burial." She looked up slowly, locking eyes with each person, but instead of a peaceful journey, I was profiled, publicly humiliated, and physically assaulted on a plane I legally own. No one spoke. Even the air held its breath. "I've read your statements. I've seen the attempts to explain, but let me tell you what happened through my eyes. I was seen as a threat, not because I raised my voice, not because I refused compliance, but because I was black in a seat that made people uncomfortable. A woman across the table, Miriam Lowe, head of human resources, cleared her throat. "Ms. Monroe, we deeply regret." Arielle held up one hand. "I don't need rehearsed regrets. I need accountability." Miriam sat back. Arielle stepped around the table, walking slowly. "I am not here to fire people for sport. I am here to tear out the rot at the root." One of the younger executives, a logistics director named Shane, raised a tentative hand. Are we shutting the airline down?" "No," Arielle said. "We're transforming it. Starting now." She clicked a remote. The room lights dimmed as the screen behind her flickered to life. A new logo appeared, soft curves of silver and sky blue, wrapping around a rising sun. "Solora Air," gasps echoed quietly. "The name, Clear View, dies today," she said, along with the culture it allowed. Slides began cycling on the screen, new training programs, whistleblower protections, instant passenger recourse platforms, an anonymous feedback line directly to Arielle's office, and a partnership with a racial equity nonprofit for mandatory staff workshops. The last slide read, "Dignity at Altitude." Arielle looked around. "You have two choices, evolve or exit." No one moved. She didn't expect them to, not yet. Change never begins with applause. It begins with reckoning. Outside the building, cameras lined the street. Protesters held signs, not against Arielle, but against what she represented confronting. A long-ignored sickness, back inside, in a small recording studio on the 10th floor. Arielle prepared for a live stream to every Clearview, now Solora employee around the world. Lana adjusted the microphone. "You sure you want to do this live?" Arielle nodded. "Yes. No edits. No spin. They need to hear it raw." As the countdown began, Arielle closed her eyes briefly. A memory surfaced. She was 12, sitting on her mother's lap in a cheap vinyl seat at a bus depot. Her mother's hands were rough but gentle. They were refused boarding because a man in uniform said the bus was too full. But another white family had gotten on just before them. She remembered how her mother didn't argue. She just looked down at Arielle and whispered, "Remember this feeling. Baby girl. Carry it so no one else has to." The camera blinked green. She opened her eyes. "Hello, everyone. This is Arielle Monroe, founder of Pulse Core Health, and now Executive Chair of Solora Air. You may have seen my name in the news this week. You may have seen that I was assaulted on one of our planes. That's true, but that's not what this message is about." She took a breath. "This message is about you, about the future we're building together, and about what I expect what I promise we will no longer tolerate." She laid it all out. The new company values, the new protections, the zero-tolerance policy. And then she said something that made Lana's breath catch. Every flight will now include a passenger dignity officer. They won't wear uniforms. They'll just watch, and they'll report directly to me. The comment section below the live stream lit up like wildfire. From Atlanta, finally. She sees us. From Denver, it's about time someone with power gave a damn. From someone anonymous, I worked that flight. I was scared, but I won't be silent anymore. Arielle finished the stream with one line. "We don't soar unless every soul on board feels seen." That night, as media outlets reran clips and anchors debated whether Solora was a woke PR stunt or the future of aviation, Arielle returned home. She stepped into the quiet of her condo and finally allowed herself to cry. Not because she was weak, but because the weight of justice is heavy, even for the strong. She opened her mother's jewelry box and took out a small photo her mother, smiling in a church parking lot, holding Arielle as a baby. "Do you see me now?" "Mama," she whispered, "I'm trying." Then she walked into her office and began drafting a new policy, one that would require all executives, including herself, to undergo quarterly bias training, reviewed by independent auditors. Because change didn't start with passengers, it started with leaders, and this time, no one would look away. Arielle Monroe stepped onto Flight 518 to Atlanta 6 weeks after the slap. Not in disguise this time, no hidden intent, no silent tests. She wore a simple navy blazer over a soft cream blouse. Her curls were loose today, framing her face with effortless softness. She carried a worn leather satchel, a gift from her mother on the day she got into Stanford. It had traveled thousands of miles and still smelled faintly of her mother's rosewater perfume. This flight wasn't for business, or at least not the kind that came with suits and spreadsheets. It was for reckoning. Row 1A was hers again, but she didn't go there. She made her way down the aisle slowly, making eye contact with each passenger. Nods, smiles, a few double takes. Some recognized her, most didn't, but they all sensed something. She stopped at 14C. A woman sat there, thin shoulders, gray cardigan, hair pinned back, frizzy from age and wind. She clutched a canvas tote in her lap like it held something precious. Her face was weathered, but not defeated. Arielle smiled softly. "May I?" The woman blinked. "Are you trying to sit here?" Arielle nodded. "I mean, sure," she said, moving her bag. "It's just economy." "Don't you usually sit up there?" "I do," Arielle said, "but not today." She slid into the seat beside her and buckled in. The woman tilted her head. "I'm sorry, you look so familiar." "Are you in television?" "No," Arielle replied, "not on purpose." The woman chuckled. "You're that lady who owns the plane now." "Right." Arielle smiled. "One of them." The woman extended her hand. Gloria Whitfield, retired school teacher. I taught 3rd grade for 37 years. Arielle Monroe. I used to get detention in 3rd grade for reading too much. Gloria's laugh was pure warmth. "You sound like one of mine." The flight attendants passed by, pausing momentarily when they saw Arielle in economy. No one questioned her, not anymore, but the confusion lingered in their eyes. As the plane took off, Gloria leaned slightly toward her. "You know, I used to fly with my late husband. He was a jazz musician. We didn't have much money, but when we could afford it, we always sat together, always near the back, less turbulence, more people to talk to." Arielle turned slightly in her seat. "Did he pass recently, 3 years ago?" "Cancer. The kind that moves fast and doesn't care how sweet you are." "I'm sorry, don't be. He lived loud. I got 34 years with him. Some people don't get half that." The beverage cart came around. Arielle ordered black coffee. Gloria got apple juice and 2 packets of shortbread cookies. "They always taste like chalk," Gloria whispered, "but I still eat them every time. Habit." As they sipped in silence, Arielle noticed a young girl across the aisle in 14B, maybe 7 or 8. Mixed race, bright eyes, worn hoodie. She kept looking over at Arielle, then quickly away. After a few minutes, the girl leaned over and asked Gloria, "Is that the airplane lady?" Gloria looked at Arielle, then back at the girl. "Sure is." The girl looked at Arielle shyly. You made that rule where the pilot's got to stop being mean. Arielle laughed gently. That's part of it. My mom said we don't fly anymore. Said people like us don't belong up here. But the church helped us get this ticket. We're going to see my cousin. He's sick. Arielle's throat caught for a second. What's your name, Imani? Well, Imani, she said. You belong on every plane, every time. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Imani beamed. I told my mom that. She cried. Gloria leaned over to Arielle. They're everywhere, these little ones, listening, carrying what we don't always see. Arielle nodded. The rest of the flight passed quietly. Gloria shared stories of chalkboards and rebellious kids with hidden genius. Arielle told her about growing up in East Oakland, working at a laundromat to help her mom cover rent. How she started Pulse Corps out of a cramped apartment with one laptop and no investors. You earned all this, Gloria said softly, and yet you still sit here with us. Arielle smiled. This is where I learned to see, and I can't forget what I've seen. As the plane began descending into Atlanta, an announcement came over the speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for flying Solora Air. On behalf of our new leadership team, we want to remind you that every seat on this aircraft is a seat of dignity. No exceptions. You are seen, you are safe, and you matter. Gloria squeezed Arielle's hand. That wasn't in the old scripts. No, Arielle said. It wasn't. After the landing, as passengers stood to disembark, the flight attendant who had delivered the coffee approached Arielle. She was young, Asian American, nervous. I just wanted to say thank you, she whispered. My older brother was removed from a plane last year. Said it changed him. He doesn't fly anymore, but he saw your story. Said it gave him back something. Hope, I guess. Arielle nodded, her voice gentle. Tell him he always had it. We just reminded him. As Arielle exited with Gloria, walking slowly into the arrival gate, reporters lingered outside the ropes, hoping for a moment, a comment, anything. She paused beside Gloria and turned to the cameras. I don't have a statement, she said, but I have a truth. She looked at the lenses directly. If we only show up in first class, we'll never understand what happens behind the curtain. So I will continue to fly every seat, not to test, not to shame, but to see. Because change doesn't come from power. It comes from presence. Then she turned and walked away, hand in hand with the retired teacher who once taught dignity in a broken classroom, now witnessing it rise 30,000 feet in the air, the night before her Senate testimony. Arielle Monroe sat alone in a quiet corner of the Concourse Hotel near Reagan National Airport. The soft hum of distant televisions played through the walls, but she didn't turn hers on. Instead, she stared at the manila folder in her lap. Inside was a simple printout, the passenger manifest from Flight 221, the day everything changed, row by row, seat by seat. Every name was there, some she remembered vividly. Others had blurred into the background of that long, humiliating flight, but one stood out. Tamara Voss, flight attendant. Her name now sat atop an active ethics investigation. 3 other passengers had come forward since the incident, reporting previous acts of verbal abuse, intimidation, and selective mistreatment, all buried under layers of corporate bureaucracy. Arielle flipped the page and stared at a name she hadn't noticed before. Karen S. Halstead, seat 3B, the woman who had smirked when Tamara slapped her, who had said nothing, done nothing. Arielle exhaled slowly. She remembered that face more than the strike itself, not because it hurt more, but because it mirrored the indifference that allowed injustice to grow. A knock at her door broke the silence. It was Lana Carrington, her chief of staff. Lana, always sharply dressed, had swapped her usual heels for worn sneakers and carried 2 cups of tea instead of a laptop. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said gently. "I've been reading ghosts," Arielle replied, motioning to the manifest. Lana sat beside her. "You don't have to do this, you know. No one would blame you for skipping that room full of senators tomorrow." Arielle shook her head. "I'm not walking away from the conversation now. Not when the turbulence has finally shaken something loose." She picked up the tea, held it in both hands. "I'm not scared of speaking," she continued. "I'm scared of being heard too late." Lana watched her carefully. "They want to turn you into a symbol. You understand that, right? The graceful black woman who forgave her attacker, who said all the right thing, who moved on, but I didn't move on. Arielle said, I moved through, and I'm still walking." Lana nodded, then walked loud tomorrow, the next morning. The hearing room was packed. Cameras, journalists, politicians adjusting their microphones and postures with equal precision. Arielle entered in a navy blue suit, no frills, no branding, just the weight of her presence. She sat behind the long wood-paneled desk. Her prepared remarks were already in front of every senator, but she hadn't come to read them. "Ms. Monroe," said Senator Farley, an older white man from Connecticut, "you've become a national figure in this debate on racial discrimination in aviation. Some say you've politicized your experience." Arielle met his gaze, calm and clear. "My presence isn't political, Senator. My existence is simply inconvenient to systems that preferred I stay quiet." Murmurs rippled through the room. Senator Dawson, a black woman from Illinois, leaned forward. "Ms. Monroe, how did it feel in that moment? When you were told to leave your seat," Arielle took a breath. "It felt like the history of my grandmother's silence, my mother's restraint, and every time I've been told to be smaller just to make someone else feel comfortable in their bias." The cameras clicked furiously. "I didn't cry that day, not because it didn't hurt," she continued, "but because I was used to it. And that's the problem." A young intern seated behind her passed a note forward. Lana, seated nearby, leaned in and whispered, "They've just released a public statement. Tamara Voss has been officially banned from all commercial aviation service roles, effective immediately." Arielle absorbed the words quietly. Then she stood. "I want to be clear," she said to the room. "Accountability is not vengeance. Firing one woman doesn't fix what made her feel so empowered to strike me in the first place." A hush fell. "This isn't about seating charts," she continued. "This is about dignity, about who we see as worthy of respect before we check the boarding pass." Outside the courthouse steps, dozens of supporters waited. Civil rights leaders, educators, single mothers, retired pilots. A few wore shirts with Arielle's name. Most didn't, but they stood for something bigger than her name. A young woman stepped forward from the crowd. She held a baby in one arm and a letter in the other. "I wanted to give you this," she said. "My mom was on your flight that day. She said she'd never seen someone stay so calm. She cried when she got home, not from sadness but from relief." Arielle opened the letter. It was a thank you note, handwritten, 4 sentences long. It ended with, "You reminded me We don't always have to fight to be strong. Sometimes we just have to stay rooted. Back at her hotel, Arielle took out the manifest again. She crossed out Tamara's name, not to erase her, but to mark that the system had finally done something. Then she wrote in the margins beside seat 14C Mrs. Gloria Whitfield reminder that Grace still flies with us, and beside 14B Amani Reynolds, future CEO of whatever she chooses. The manifest wasn't just a list anymore. It was a map of where the story began and where it still had to go. Because Arielle Monroe knew this wasn't over. She wasn't flying solo. The whole world was beginning to board the truth with her. Arielle Monroe didn't return home immediately after the Senate hearing. She needed space to breathe, real, quiet space, not the curated stillness of a penthouse or the echo of applause in grand halls. So she flew to a remote airstrip just outside Sedona, Arizona, where the land blushed red and the sky seemed endless. She stayed in a modest cabin overlooking a ridge. No staff, no schedule, no Lana, even though her chief of staff had gently offered to join her. Just silence, and the weight she hadn't yet fully unpacked. The mornings were slow and reverent. Arielle would walk barefoot across the cool wooden deck, sipping black coffee from a chipped mug. The birds didn't care she owned an airline. The wind didn't ask what happened on Flight 221, and that was comforting. But the nights whispered. They asked questions she had no clever answers for. Why didn't you say more in the moment? Why didn't you fight back? Why did you still hope people would do the right thing when history had taught you better? She sat on the porch swing long after the sun dipped beneath the canyon, her mind replaying that slap over and over, not because of the pain, but because of what it unlocked inside her. Not rage, not revenge, but grief. Grief for every time she had stayed quiet to keep her job, her access, her peace. Grief for every woman who was told calm down when she needed someone to stand up. And grief for the girl she once was 7 years old, standing in a grocery store line while the clerk ignored her mother and addressed the white woman behind them instead. That little girl had grown up, built empires and bought planes, but she'd never stopped craving fairness. One evening, as dusk painted the desert gold, Arielle finally called Lana. "You should come tomorrow," she said softly. "Bring the new slate." The new what? The new executive slate? The leadership board? We're not going back to business as usual. Lana paused. "I'll book a flight tonight." By the next morning, they sat across a table in the cabin sunroom. Lana brought files. Arielle brought resolve. "I want every internal DEI initiative made public." Arielle began, "No more feel-good posters in break rooms. I want real reporting structures, quarterly audits, external partnerships with civil rights watchdogs." Lana nodded, taking notes quickly. "I want flight attendants retrained not just for safety, but for humanity. Emotional intelligence, implicit bias, historical context. If someone can't pass that program, they don't fly with us." Arielle's voice sharpened. "And I want a passenger code of conduct, not just for unruly behavior, but for racially motivated complaints. No more weaponizing discomfort because someone's seatmate has braids or an accent." Lana looked up. "You're building something much bigger than a policy shift." "I'm building a new altitude," Arielle replied. "For all of us." They worked through the afternoon, cross-checking roles, restructuring oversight, even planning surprise audits by mystery travelers. But as dusk returned, Lana noticed something shift in Arielle. She seemed untethered, not unsure, but unsettled. "You okay?" Lana asked gently. Arielle folded her hands and stared out the window. The canyon glowed with the last light of day. "I keep thinking about my mother," she whispered. "She worked as a postal clerk for 33 years. She never sat in a first class, never flew farther than Ohio." Lana stayed quiet. She used to say, "Don't make trouble, Ari. Be the good kind of quiet." And I followed that for years. Even when I had power, even when I had money. Her voice cracked. But quiet didn't stop that slap. Quiet didn't protect me. Lana reached across the table and held her hand. "And yet, you're still not yelling." "I don't need to yell," Arielle said. "I just need to be undeniable." Later that night, Lana left her to rest, but Arielle couldn't sleep. She stood barefoot in the middle of the room, holding her phone, scrolling through old voicemails from her mother. One from last year played softly. "Hey, baby. Just checking in. I saw your interview on Bloomberg. You look so serious, but your hair was perfect. Don't let them wear you out. Ari, you've always had your father's fire, but I pray you keep my peace too. Love you." Arielle clutched the phone to her chest. Her mother had passed 5 months ago. She hadn't told anyone, not even Lana, because grief didn't respect press cycles or shareholder meetings. Grief arrived whenever it pleased. And tonight, it came as a memory and a voice that once wrapped her in safety. She sat down and opened her journal. She began to write not strategy, not mission statements, but truth. "I didn't want to become a symbol. I wanted to be invisible that day. I boarded as a woman, not a billionaire. But maybe that's why it mattered. Because people shouldn't have to be powerful to be treated human. They shouldn't need press to get protection." She paused, then added, "And tomorrow, I will not ask permission to change the sky." In the morning, she called the Solera executive board from the porch. "I'm launching an initiative," she announced. "We're calling it Altitude, a Leadership Trust in Unified Dignity Through Unfiltered Empathy. It will fund equity programs in aviation schools, create a whistleblower hotline for in-flight discrimination, and sponsor 500 scholarships for underrepresented youth who want to become pilots, engineers, and CEOs." There was silence on the line. Then, applause. Arielle closed her laptop and stared at the ridgeline. She had flown thousands of hours in her life, but for the first time, she was ready to soar. 3 weeks had passed since Arielle Monroe introduced the Altitude Initiative. What started as a press release had blossomed into something far more powerful, a groundswell. Pilots from across the country sent letters. Mothers from underserved communities tagged her in posts about their children, now dreaming of the skies. Retired flight attendants wrote to say they wish something like Altitude had existed when they were still in uniform. But with praise came resistance. One morning, Lana Carrington entered Arielle's office with a frown. She placed a printed email on the desk. "It's from the Pilots Association. Some members are saying your initiative is divisive, that you're injecting race into an industry that's already strained." Arielle scanned the words. The message was polite, clinical, but every sentence dripped with quiet opposition disguised as concern. "They're uncomfortable," Arielle said plainly. "Yes," Lana replied, "because for once, they're not at the center." Arielle folded the paper, placing it beside her coffee mug. "Schedule a round table. I want to hear them out, but I'm not here to soothe egos. I'm here to create sky-wide safety." That evening, she took a private Solera jet to Boston, where the round table was held at Logan International Airport's Terminal E conference room. Inside, 12 senior pilots sat in silence as she entered. The atmosphere felt like a courtroom, tense, guarded. Captain Raymond Walker, the most senior among them, cleared his throat. "Ms. Monroe," he began, "thank you for being here. We understand your goals are admirable, but some of us feel we're being labeled without cause. We don't tolerate racism in our cockpits." Arielle studied his face. His tone wasn't hostile, just tired. Tired of change he didn't initiate. Tired of being accused of things he believed himself immune to. "I appreciate your service," she said calmly, "but tolerance isn't the same as active protection." He shifted. "With respect, what do you want from us?" Arielle stood not with force, but with quiet certainty. "I want every child who walks onto a plane to feel that their skin tone won't determine how they're treated. I want every crew member to understand that power can harm when left unchecked. And I want the industry that shaped this country to reflect the full story of the people it serves." One younger pilot, a Latina woman named Camila Reyes, raised her hand. "I support you," she said. "But I'm afraid, too, speaking up still has consequences, sometimes subtle, sometimes not." Arielle nodded. "That's why we're building new systems, not just to punish wrongdoers, but to protect truth-tellers." She left the room with no promises made, but one truth made clear: change wasn't waiting for permission. On her flight home, Arielle sat beside the window and watched as the stars blinked into view. She wasn't alone on the jet. Across the aisle sat an unexpected passenger, Amani Reynolds, the little girl from Flight 221, now with her hair in a neat puff, wearing purple headphones. Her mother, Dr. Michaela Reynolds, a pediatric oncologist, had sent a message through Lana. Amani wanted to thank the lady with the calm eyes. They sat together in silence for a while, until Amani leaned close and whispered, "Do you still fly even after they were mean to you?" Arielle smiled. "Yes, baby, I do." "Why? Because the sky belongs to all of us, not just the ones who think they own it." Amani nodded, then handed her a drawing. It showed a small plane, hand-colored with crayons. Inside, stick figures held hands, their skin every shade of brown, peach, and gold. On the tail, the words, "Everyone is safe here." Arielle folded the drawing like a sacred note and slipped it into her journal. The next day, Arielle met with her legal team. A pending lawsuit had landed on her desk, filed by Tamara Voss, the fired flight attendant. "She's claiming emotional distress," said attorney Miles Granger, "says she's been harassed online, blacklisted unfairly, and believes her termination was retaliatory." Arielle considered this. A deep, unsettling irony buzzed at the edges of the conversation. "She was the one who struck me," she said slowly, "and now she's the one claiming victimhood." "Yes," Miles replied, "but perception is being weaponized. She's aligning with groups who claim this was a corporate overreach. They're twisting the facts." Arielle turned to Lana. "I want to respond," she said, "publicly no, personally." She drafted the letter that evening, not to be sent, but to be spoken. She would read it aloud at the Solora annual gala, a black tie affair now transformed into a fundraiser for Altitude. When the night arrived, she stood under the soft glow of chandeliers, a string quartet humming in the background, business elites, pilots, students, engineers all mingled under one roof. Arielle stepped onto the stage. She didn't read from a prompter. She read from her heart. "There's someone who once harmed me, on a flight where I was supposed to be invisible," She has since claimed I ruined her life, that by speaking the truth, I created injustice. The room hushed, but I did not speak to punish her. I spoke to protect the ones who came next. She looked out at the audience, to the little girl in 14B, to the quiet father with the accent, to the elderly woman who flinched when asked to show her boarding pass for the third time. I see you. I am you, and this sky will not forget you again. She closed the speech with Amani's drawing projected behind her. Everyone is safe here. As the applause rose, so did the meaning. It wasn't just about justice. It was about reclamation. After the gala, donations to Altitude surged by $12 million 24 hours. Airline partners began requesting Solora's training modules. Even schools reached out, asking how to adopt the curriculum for young pilots of color. But Arielle knew the work had just begun. She walked into her office late that night, kicked off her heels, and sat on the floor. It felt right, because revolution doesn't always wear polish. Sometimes it shows up barefoot, holding a drawing from a child and whispering, "Keep going, keep going." The morning after the gala, Arielle Monroe stood barefoot in her high-rise apartment overlooking Seattle's waking skyline, coffee in hand. Her eyes drifted toward a horizon smudged with the soft glow of dawn. The applause from last night still rang faintly in her memory, but the moment that lingered most was the quiet one kneeling beside a child's drawing, letting its simplicity whisper a truth no boardroom ever could. Yet peace was a fragile thread. Her phone vibrated. Lana's voice was tight. "It's gone public." Arielle didn't need to ask what it was. Tamara Voss had released an exclusive interview on a morning talk show. The segment was headlined, "Wrongfully Fired Flight Attendant Speaks Out." Arielle pulled the clip on her tablet. Tamara, dressed in muted pastels, sat beside an empathetic host who leaned in as she spoke. I was overwhelmed. I never saw her face clearly. I didn't know who she was. It wasn't personal, but now my life has been destroyed. I can't work. I'm receiving threats. I'm afraid to leave my home. The host nodded gravely, "And you were never given a chance to explain your side." Tamara shook her head. "Not once." Arielle paused the video. Her breath caught not from rage, but from the painful recognition of something deeper. Tamara believed her own words. There it was again, the illusion of fragility cloaking power, the centuries-old act of turning consequence into victimhood. A slap followed by a sob, a bruise followed by a press tour. Later that day, Arielle met with her public relations advisor, Malik Shore, in her office. Public sentiments mixed. Malik said, "There's support for Altitude, but this interview is swaying some moderates. They're asking why you won't engage with her claims directly." "I won't duel in the dirt," Arielle replied. "I'm not here to compete for pain points." "I agree," Malik said, "but we need to offer the public something deeper than silence." She nodded. It was time for truth, not just reaction. That evening, Solora released a carefully produced video. It featured no music, no glamour, just Arielle seated in a modest chair, natural light pouring through a window behind her. She looked into the camera. 3 months ago, I was humiliated, not because I misbehaved, not because I asked for special treatment, but because I boarded a plane as a black woman in a luxury seat. Her voice remained calm, unshaken. I didn't retaliate with rage. I responded with reform. I chose to build something our world doesn't often allow black women to do without question. She paused, letting breath fill the space. But the narrative has now shifted. A woman who once struck me has now been positioned as the victim. This is not new. This is a pattern, a reflex. When systems are challenged, they protect themselves by reframing discomfort as injustice. She finished the video with a simple, final truth. I'm not angry, I'm awake, and I won't be silenced into comfort. The video went viral. Comments poured in, some supportive, some furious, others unsure. But what mattered most wasn't who agreed, it was who understood. That weekend, Arielle was invited to speak at a university aviation program in Atlanta. Students of all backgrounds filled the auditorium. One by one, they rose to ask questions. A shy young man at the back finally stood, clutching a worn notepad. "Ms. Monroe," he said, "what do you do when people only see your presence as a threat?" Arielle walked toward the edge of the stage. "I remember that my presence was never accidental," she said. "It's earned. And no matter how small others try to make me feel, I refuse to shrink to make them comfortable." A thunder of applause rose. After the event, Arielle met privately with 5 students who had quietly organized a new group, Wings of Color. Their goal was to offer mentorship and scholarships to aspiring BIPOC aviation professionals. Arielle offered to fund their first 5 pilot school admissions on the spot. But beneath the momentum, exhaustion clung to her. She hadn't slept well in weeks. The emotional weight wasn't just public, it was personal. The harder she worked, the more backlash surfaced. People questioned her motives, called her performative, too wealthy to understand real struggle, too calm to be telling the truth. One night, she stared at herself in the bathroom mirror. "I've built a world they keep trying to evict me from," she whispered. Her reflection did not flinch. She walked to her desk and pulled out her journal. In the margins beside Amani's drawing, she wrote, "Sometimes liberation feels like loneliness in a crowded room. But I'll keep standing, even when I'm the only one." Then came the call that changed everything. It was Amber Ellis, the junior flight attendant from Flight 221. Her voice trembled over the line. "Ms. Monroe, I think it's time I spoke up." Arielle remained silent, letting Amber fill the space. "I saw everything. The slap, the smirk, the look on the captain's face when he decided to ignore you. I should have said something then. But I was afraid." Arielle's voice was warm. "You're speaking now." Amber continued. "Tamara's lawyers have offered me hush money, NDA. But I can't live with myself if I take it. I have emails, a voice recording, even some internal notes Tamara left behind." "Amber," Arielle said gently, "you don't owe me anything." "But I owe myself," Amber whispered. "I owe the truth." They met the next day in a private conference room. Amber handed over her notes, including a phone recording where Tamara boasted about putting that woman in her place. Arielle didn't weep, she didn't scream, she simply nodded. A truth she'd lived had now been documented. The case against Salora Airlines evaporated the next morning when Arielle's legal team submitted evidence of tampering and falsified claims. Tamara Voss's lawsuit collapsed before it reached court. But Arielle didn't celebrate. There was nothing joyful about watching a broken system eat its own. Instead, she stood with Amber during a private press briefing. Amber read a short statement. "I was afraid of losing my job, but silence doesn't save you. It just keeps someone else in danger. I speak today not as a hero, but as someone finally brave enough to be human." Arielle placed a hand gently on her shoulder. The descent into truth had not been clean. It had been turbulent, but it was safe now to land, and the runway ahead was clear. The press didn't just report the story, it inhaled it. Amber Ellis's whistleblowing became the pivot the public hadn't expected. With the audio recording, the messages, and the handwritten post-it left behind 1A's attitude needs a little turbulence. The media's narrative twisted in real time. For days, news anchors fumbled between apology and outrage, reassessing their earlier coverage of Tamara Voss's sob story. Public sentiment, once divided, began to coalesce. But for Arielle Monroe, this wasn't vindication, it was revelation. Even truth had to scream louder than lies to be heard. She sat at her dining table late that night, cross-legged in worn sweatpants, a glass of orange juice sweating in her hand. Across from her sat Jaden Wells, the aviation intern from Flight 221. He had asked for a meeting not for opportunity, but for clarity. "I've been telling my mom what happened," Jaden said softly, "and she keeps asking me why it took a billionaire to be mistreated before people listened." Arielle didn't answer right away. She let the question settle. Its gravity didn't surprise her. It exhausted her. She met his eyes. It didn't take a billionaire. It just took someone who could afford to be believed. Jaden looked down. "I don't know if I ever want to fly again." "You will," she said. "Not for them. For you." He hesitated. "I think I want to go into policy." Arielle smiled. "Then let's get you there." The next morning, she stood before the Solora Executive Board. They were gathered in a sunlit conference room with a view over the Seattle skyline, waiting for her to speak. She wore no jewelry, no makeup, just a gray pantsuit and unshakable presence. What happened on Flight 221 wasn't a PR disaster. She began, it was a mirror, and if we only use this moment to fix our image, we'll stay broken. The silence that followed was dense. "I don't want compliance," she continued. "I want consciousness. That means bias training won't be a checkbox, it'll be a culture. Every employee, every flight, every cabin crew member will undergo the full immersion training, not a slideshow, a lived simulation. We will partner with civil rights educators and frontline workers. This isn't about optics, it's about oxygen. The air we breathe has to change." A man at the far end of the table cleared his throat. "Won't this make hiring more difficult?" "It'll make it more honest," she replied, "and more diverse. We're not looking for ease, we're building endurance." A pause, then slow nods. Later that week, Arielle walked onto the tarmac at Solora's main hangar. Waiting beside an aircraft wrapped in white protective cloth stood dozens of staff, interns, engineers, and ground crew members. On cue, the wrap was peeled back, revealing the new livery of Solora's flagship plane. No gold, no gleam, just clean lines and one inscription, small and clear above the first door dignity at 30,000 feet. The aircraft had no first-class section, just a unified cabin, wide seats, equitable spacing, no class hierarchy. It was a prototype of the Equality Fleet Solora's new initiative to reimagine flight from the inside out. Reporters swarmed the story. Some mocked the removal of first class. Others applauded it as radical. Arielle didn't explain. She didn't need to. Solora had ceased being a brand. It was now a belief. Days later, she returned to Houston quietly for the first time since the incident. Her childhood neighborhood looked the same: oak trees leaning over cracked sidewalks, porch swings still creaking under the late summer sun. She walked up the path to a modest house at the end of Fairview Street. Inside, Mrs. Gloria Whitfield, her fellow passenger from Flight 221, stood waiting with sweet tea and a folded quilt. "I made you something," she said, eyes twinkling behind reading glasses. Arielle unfolded the quilt. It was stitched with patches of blue, gold, and gray, with one bold panel embroidered with words, "Still we rise." They sat on the porch, silence breathing between them. "I never got to thank you," Gloria said. "You shouldn't have had to," Arielle whispered. Gloria looked over the horizon. "Do you think it'll change? It already is," Arielle replied, one stitch at a time. That evening, back at her hotel, Arielle watched a recorded broadcast of a Senate hearing on transportation reform. Among the speakers was Jaden Wells, now an appointed youth policy advisor. He stood confidently behind the podium, his tie slightly crooked, his voice clear. "Equity in air travel isn't about perks. It's about personhood. When passengers of color are treated as threats before they're treated as human, we all lose altitude." The room erupted in quiet applause. Arielle smiled, proud. The echo chamber had broken. Truth wasn't just resonating, it was multiplying. That night, she opened her inbox. Among the hundreds of messages, one stood out subject from Tamara. She stared at it for several minutes before opening it. "Arielle, I don't expect forgiveness, but I need to tell you, seeing the recording, hearing myself, I finally heard what you felt. I was wrong. I'm sorry, truly." Tamara Arielle sat still, letting the words wash through her. She didn't reply. Not yet. Forgiveness wasn't a performance. It was a journey. The next morning, as her plane lifted off the Houston runway, Arielle looked out the window, not at the clouds, but at the shape they didn't yet take. The future wasn't promised, but it was possible. And for the first time in weeks, she exhaled without weight, above the chaos, above the echo, above the noise. She was still rising. It was the first press conference Arielle Monroe had agreed to in over a year. The venue wasn't grand. It was a converted aircraft hangar, stripped of banners and gloss, holding rows of chairs on polished concrete and a single podium at the front. The air buzzed with anticipation, not just because of the name behind the event, but because people sensed something bigger than rebranding or policy. This wasn't about a company. It was about a reckoning. Lana Carrington, Arielle's chief of staff, stood by her side backstage, holding a neatly folded index card. Arielle glanced at it but didn't take it. "I don't need notes," she said, smoothing the crease in her charcoal gray blazer. "This isn't a speech. It's a promise." The crowd hushed as she stepped up to the mic. Arielle didn't greet them with theatrics, no applause cues, no big smiles. She simply looked up into their faces and spoke. "On May 18th, I was slapped in seat 1A. The room held its breath. That slap was not just about me. It was about every black woman who has ever been mistaken for less. Every person of color told to prove their right to exist in a space they already earned. Every elder humiliated for aging in the wrong skin. Every child watched suspiciously before being offered safety." She paused. Let the silence hold her words like a heartbeat. "I own Solora not because I sought power, but because I got tired of asking for space." A ripple moved through the crowd. Some people shifted in their seats. Some stood straighter. "I stand here today not as a victim of a flight attendant's anger," she continued, but as a witness to what happens when systems make cruelty convenient and apology conditional. From the front row, Jaden Wells nodded slowly. Behind him sat Mrs. Gloria Whitfield, dressed in Sunday white, her hands folded over her cane like scripture. Arielle's voice didn't rise, but it carried. "I'm not here to offer forgiveness in a press kit. I'm here to show you what justice looks like when it builds, not burns." A large screen behind her flickered to life. The new Solora Charter appeared, one line at a time. No first-class segregation, equal access to services and support, culturally competent staff across all roles, mental health care for frontline workers, direct hotline for in-flight discrimination, monitored by an independent civil rights board. It ended with a single phrase, center-aligned. The sky belongs to everyone. The audience broke into applause, not the wild, cheering kind, but the reverent kind, the kind that lingered even after hands stopped clapping. Arielle stepped down. She didn't linger for questions. Outside, the sun spilled down through a crisp Seattle sky. As she exited the hangar, reporters followed at a distance, unsure whether to approach or simply watch. Jaden caught up to her first. "That was—" he started. "Enough?" she asked. "No," he said, shaking his head. "It was the beginning." She smiled. As they walked toward the waiting car, a small girl stepped out from behind her mother, a brown-skinned child no older than 7, holding a toy plane in her hand. "Miss Monroe," she said, voice soft but steady. Arielle knelt down. "Yes, sweetheart." The girl held out her plane. "It's Solora. I made it in art class." Arielle took the little cardboard model in her hands. It had the word hope scribbled on the wings in glitter pen. "Can I fly on it one day?" the girl asked. Arielle touched her shoulder gently. "Not one day," she said. "Soon." The child beamed. Arielle stood and nodded to the mother, then stepped into the black sedan waiting by the curb. The car pulled away, leaving behind flashing cameras and microphones too late to catch anything real. Inside the car, Lana glanced at Arielle. "You didn't answer Tamara's email," she said quietly. Arielle stared out the window for a long moment. "She'll get my answer," she finally said, just not in words. Back at her office, Arielle opened her laptop and typed a single directive. From Arielle Monroe to all Solora executives subject internal equity update. Effective immediately. All previously terminated crew members willing to undergo restorative training and truth-telling participation may apply for re-entry via our rehabilitation initiative. The email ended with 3 words. Redemption is earned. She hit send and closed her laptop. Later that evening, she stood on the rooftop of her Seattle home, barefoot against the smooth stone, watching planes blink across the night sky like quiet promises. The city hummed below her, a lullaby of resilience and unfinished stories. Her phone buzzed, a message from her mother's old friend in Houston who had watched the entire broadcast live. She would be proud, baby, but I think she'd also say, "Don't stop now." Arielle smiled. No, she wouldn't stop now. She didn't rise just to land. There was still altitude left to climb, and if she had to build runways for others while she flew, so be it. The sky had been taken for too long. Now, it was time to return it, to the people, to the voices once silenced, to every little girl who dared to dream of sitting in 1A not because of privilege, but because of possibility. Arielle closed her eyes and whispered to the wind, "You belong here too." And the sky, vast and silent, whispered back. She never raised her voice. Arielle Monroe didn't scream, threaten, or retaliate in rage. She stood her ground with stillness, truth, and vision. And through that quiet strength, she transformed humiliation into hope, not just for herself, but for everyone who's ever been told they don't belong. This wasn't just about a slap in seat 1A. It was about every moment society has turned its back on someone because of the color of their skin, the shape of their body, the age of their hands, or the softness of their voice. It's about reminding the world that being calm is not being weak, that dignity doesn't ask for permission, and that true power doesn't need to be loud to change everything. So, if you felt her pain, if you held your breath when she stood up, if you saw your own story somewhere in the silence, you're not alone, and you are never powerless. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your voice helps keep these stories alive, and trust us, what's coming next will move you even deeper. Until then, stay grounded, stay human, and never give up your seat, not for anyone.